Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sprint 244 review. Let's get started. I'll start with the overview, Gilbert on the UI, Adam on providers. I'll do the platform today, and Keenan on the API. Sprint 244 was a larger sprint than normal because we went through the Rails 7 merge. There were a lot of PRs to all repos. So there were, I can't even read the number on this one. A lot of PRs merged this sprint. But this chart's more interesting. There were a ton of other and test type PRs with a small amount of bugs and enhancements. And over to Gilbert on the UI.
Hey, thanks, Jason. So for the UI, we started off with a couple bug fixes. So we had I fixed the provider charts tooltip. We also had some translation issues that were fixed. Joe was able to use Uglifier Harmony mode to handle ES6 syntax with L7. So other fixes, I think, by Joe, the Uglifier compressor with Harmony support, and then Adam was able to fix the VM info button checking EMS cloud providers. Then we also had a UIPR as an enhancement, the adding Resource Cloud Pull UI for cloud managers. Next slide. So some other Rails 7 related PRs. Joe had Rails 7 test fixes. We also used Ruby 3.1 for code coverage and used Rails 7 as a way to set YAML permitted classes. Next slide. So this is just showing the provider charts tooltip before and after. Next slide. This is an example of some of the screenshots from the resource pool UI that we added as an enhancement. Next slide. That's it for the UI. Next, Adam for the providers.
Thanks, Gilbert. So this sprint in core, we added the ability to run a set of pluggable automation runners in the automation worker. This will allow us to be able to run any persistent type threads that we need to do in order to run some of the automation workflows that we're going to be doing in the future. For Amazon, we updated the instance types, and for Kubernetes, Joe added a Rails 7 way to set the YAML permitted classes for some of the tests. Next slide. And same thing for OpenStack. And for Overt, we fixed a typo in the VMware support smart state analysis that was preventing you from being able to actually click the button to run SSA for Overt. And next slide. I think that's it. Over to Joe. Oh, no, sorry, I forgot. Workflows. So Keenan added a way to pass the user ID and email from whoever requested the workflow to run into the workflow's context, so it could be used later on, particularly for the email step. And we also added bumped the flow version so that we could pull in intrinsic function support, which is really cool and lets you do a bunch of useful things in workflows without having to essentially shell out to a Docker container. You can do them directly in the workflow. For the flow gem, as part of that intrinsic function support, we did, I believe Jason did states JSON merge, which will let you manipulate hashes. He added some intrinsics for JSON to string and string to JSON. Keenan continued his enhancements of the choice rule state by adding parsing the compare key variable in the data choice rule. We added states format to help manipulate strings, and also support for hashes in states.hash, and also improving type checks in that. And I fixed a bug with the Docker and Podman container ref where a trailing new line was causing it to not be able to match to events that were raised as part of the Docker wait. So we got that fixed up so you can cross-link which container was being mapped to which workflow. And that is it for providers. Over to Joe.
Real quick, just to give credit where credit's due, Keenan was actually one that did JSON merge. Jason did string and string to JSON.
My bad.
And it was his PRs that actually helped push me over to finish the rest of it. So it was really great that he did that. Over to platform. On the enhancements, the big one was Rails 7. So Joe has been putting a lot of time into it and finally got Rails 7 over the finish line. And so the related PRs to that with Rails 7 way to set the YAML permitted classes and updating to use Ruby 3.1 and Rails 7 for all our code coverage, which was like a ton of PRs. There was a fix for an undefined method while getting the database configuration that I believe Adam worked on. Then there was a number of fixes in the appliance console area for on appliances using the correct network interface. So there's two PRs to Linux admin for adding the network interface loopback and then using JSON format for the IP command output so we can get better processing of that. There was a documentation added by a community user to update the OIDC group mapper. Then I made some changes for improving error display for Yarn audit and a rake task for rebuilding the Yarn audit pending list so that as new changes come in, we could just run a rake task and rebuild it to let us fix those things later. I also added an Ansible runner spec showing that roles requirements YAML was honored correctly. And then I added some other runner vault specs for vaulted variables in playbooks. Brandon updated the dumb init version we have in our containers to 1.2.5, also updated Go for the operator to 1.23, and also upgraded the dependencies in the operator SDK itself. And finally, we have a new repo called Ansible Manage IQ Example. It's just an example role mainly meant for testing, but I'm hoping to expand it a little bit with some other things so we can improve our testing on the Ansible runner side. For bugs, query metric rollups using start date derived from the first rollup. That was a fix on the API side. There was also some, I believe that was a part of Rails 7 changes. There was also a fix for not loading the descendant subclasses during code reload. And then there was also a fix for the CPU usage rate average should be a numeric, not a string. All those were Rails 7 fixes. Also on Rails 7 was permit YAML safe load of aliases in automate Ruby methods. And then Adam did a fix with MIQ server worker manager processes when we have non-Rails workers, making sure that they actually react to changes correctly. Bugs from that legacy network interface were some fixes to stop using the legacy network interface name and not depend on ETH0 for displaying that network information. And then updating the appliance console to 911 to support that network interface changes on the appliance console side. I fixed an issue in the operator build where there was a sed line to remove an unnecessary line from one of the YAML files, but it didn't work on Mac, so I made that line Mac compatible. And finally, Keenan fixed some issues in the feature support matrix tool that we have. And finally, Brandon fixed an issue where we weren't using Linux admin in schema, so he dropped it. And Keenan fixed an issue where test files were in the package gem and they're not necessary, so got rid of them. And that's it on the platform side. Over to Keenan on the API side.
Cool. On the bugs, I think Jason mentioned it. Joe fixed some start date issues with the metrics rollups. Okay, back to Jason.
All right. And that's it for our Sprint 244 review. The next Sprint review 245 will be on September 4th at the usual place and time. And as always, I'd like to thank all our contributors or all our presenters today and all the contributors in the Manage IQ community. Thank you.